Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello and welcome to the Impact Farming Show, everyone. I have an amazing guest here with me today. His name is Gerry Friesen from The Recovering Farmer, and Gerry is a stress expert. He is a motivational speaker, he is a humorist, and he is a mediator. Welcome, Gerry.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on the show. I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Okay. Where do I start? I was born at an early age.
Good start.
I actually grew up on a farm near Wawanesa. And after high school, I decided I wanted to go back to the farm. And so that's what I did. And my brother and I farmed together there till 2007, actually. In between there, or perhaps in addition to the farming, I got heavily involved in what I call agricultural politics. I was chairman of Manitoba Pork Est. I was president of Manitoba Pork Marketing. Was involved with Keystone Agricultural Producers. Did that kind of work outside of the farm and really thought I enjoyed it. But I guess where my life really changed was in 2000. The minister at the time appointed me to the Manitoba Farm Mediation Board. And I guess I almost had an awakening to where I found out that a lot of the stuff I had been doing in the past, I had been taking this mediator type approach where I always was interested in hearing both sides of the story. So it didn't make me a very good negotiator when I was trying to negotiate hog prices, but I took that approach. And so when I started doing the mediation work at the mediation board, I took training and really jumped into that, and that actually became a business of mine in 2006. So just before the farm wound down, I started my own business doing that. In 2007, as the farm was winding down, I saw an ad in the Cooperator asking for volunteers for the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line. And I thought at the time, well, perhaps I had something to offer there, number one, but number two, also I thought that experience and training would also help be an extension to the mediation work I do, because I was dealing with a lot of farmers at the time. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Today I still do a lot of mediation work. Some of it farm-based, some of it I do a lot of personal injury claims through the Automobile Injury Mediation Office. I love doing stress management workshops. I like presenting. So that's what I do. So you have three pillars to what you do, and do you want to go into that, like the recovering farmer? Right, and the recovering farmer is kind of aside from what I do, I suppose, in a way. In 2010, actually, I started writing a blog, and I was posting it on my signature mediation website, and then my son, who's somewhat of a IT geek, thought that, you know what, you need a separate web page for that. So he kind of designed that for me so that kind of stays separate from my mediation stuff. So I have, yes, I did, and so my workshops and stuff I do under that title, I suppose. I do my mediation work, but I'm also a conflict management specialist with Backswath Management. Excellent. So we are live at AgX 2018 in Winnipeg, and Gerry was just on a panel called Healthy Farmer, Healthy Farm, and self-titled. We were speaking about mental health and how important it is. If the farmer's healthy, the farm's going to be healthy. And you gave an amazing presentation, an honest presentation. I think there was a lot of wet eyes in the room, because it just, well, as we all know, farming can be tough, and your story probably resonated with a lot of people. Would you be willing to share that with our audience? Well, I certainly can try, Tracy. I've always found it, I guess, interesting to see how much stress farming does put on people. And I guess back in 2003, I was at the time, I was chairman of Manitoba Pork Marketing. I was chairman of Dynamic Pork. I had my own farm, which was experiencing financial difficulties because I believe it was in 1998 that the hog industry really went into a downward spiral and never seemed to come back. And so the organizations I was involved in, my farm, the members of the organizations, farmers in Manitoba were all experiencing significant difficulties. And so I was working my way through that, and suddenly I started having, which turns out now was anxiety attacks. I didn't recognize it as such at the time. In fact, I was wondering if I maybe had heart trouble. I was sitting in a mediation meeting. In fact, I remember it clearly. It was in Steinbach.
Oh, really?
With another fellow who was working with me, and we were talking. I guess trying to find solutions for a hog farming couple.
Okay.
There was 4 of us in the room, and suddenly my heart went nuts. I compared it to a fish laying on sand, just flopping around.
Yeah.
Had a shortness of breath. Thought I was actually going to pass out. It passed relatively quickly, but then it started happening more frequently. And I guess in hindsight again, I had noticed that my mood wasn't what it should be, and my thoughts weren't what they should be. So in early 2004, I did go seek medical advice from a doctor. I had a wonderful doctor. He was a farmer as well.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes, that was interesting. And he had this tendency, he much rather wanted to talk about farming than to talk about what ailed me. But
probably, yeah.
But he was also quick to prescribe pills.
Okay.
And so his thought was, you know what, you're having anxiety, which can lead to depression. You need to go on these meds. Lorazepam for anxiety, and I can't believe what my first antidepressant was. I believe Paxil is what it was called.
Okay.
So I just, you know what you do when you go to a doctor and they prescribe, you take pills and go, well, I'm going to get better, right?
Yeah.
He had given me a heads up that it might not get better quick, but it would. And so I actually ended up on the couch in a fetal position for probably 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Was I suicidal? No. But it certainly resonates with me now when people that have mental illness talk to me about, we're not afraid of dying, we're afraid of living. Because I had these thoughts in my mind going, you know what? My wife and kids would be better off financially if I died, right? I could escape the pain. And in my eyes, the world would be a better place without me. It's that whole self-esteem thing that really takes a hit.
Yeah.
And but I'm also reminded of, and I guess I'm skipping ahead a little bit, and then I'll perhaps move back. But in 2015, I got a phone call. A friend of mine, well, a friend growing up, we had kind of lost touch to a degree. We still met each other occasionally. His wife had died by suicide. And it just totally hit me like a shock. I went to the funeral, and it was the most interesting feeling I had when I left that funeral. One of the things that the family was very clear on was they had learned so much about mental illness during that week leading up to the funeral, but they made it clear that their mother had fought a courageous fight with mental illness. And that there shouldn't be a stigma to this. It was, they said it's no different than if someone dies of cancer or some other physical, illness. And so that actually encouraged me. I left the funeral feeling encouraged that, hey, I was fighting a courageous fight along with many others, and there was no shame in that, and there was no embarrassment in that. But what also struck me was there was a tiny piece of me that had a touch of envy that she had escaped her pain. Right? But the other piece that resonated with me even more was that a deep fear that there was actually this possibility that some morning I might wake up and not be able to face the day.
Yeah.
And so those were the thoughts running through my mind. But now going back a wee bit again, so as I was working my way through, basically, like I've said before, the pills started my recovery. But I think there's so much more to mental health that people have to realize and understand if they really want to come to grips with it and live with it. And so my discovery didn't really start, or the discovery I did didn't really start till later, when in fact I became involved with the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line. And the training I got there, suddenly I was starting to get an understanding of what my mental health meant to me, what my mental health or lack thereof, perhaps, was doing to me. And so it's been amazing, all the things I've learned. But I suppose I'm skipping ahead here a little bit. Going back a little bit, I had been on meds. I had gone off meds after I think about a year and a half, thinking I was okay. A few months after that, I was farming together with my brother, and my brother had a fairly serious motorcycle accident. And suddenly my world crashed again. And so I had extra responsibilities on the farm. Stress, lots of stress. He was laying in the hospital. I was trying to do his work at home, never mind my own. And so that was a fairly difficult time, and it became clear very quickly that I would need to seek help again. And my wife and I decided, you know what, instead of going on meds, let's try the talk therapy. So, made an appointment with a psychologist, was extremely disappointed in that appointment. He was more focused on the fact that I would sell a family farm rather than trying to help me. And at the end of it, he said, hey, you can't afford me, go back on meds. So that was less than encouraging. I tried, then went to a community mental health worker, and she tried really hard. But after 2 appointments, and my wife tells me that I said at the time that she said, well, you know all you need to know, just work on it. I can't remember that, but so after 2 appointments, that was it. So I wasn't feeling any better, so I went back on meds. And so I stayed on meds for a number of years, and I have nothing negative to say about meds. People react differently to different things. But then skipping ahead, when I started learning more about myself, there was a whole bunch of things that I learned that I could do that could be helpful. So in 2007, again, when I became a volunteer with the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line, I discovered some of this stuff. And then what happened is, I think about a year after I had done volunteering for them, which was part of the agreement, I was asked to facilitate workshops on men and depression. In 2010, there was this real focus on the fact that women are much more likely to seek help compared to men.
I believe it.
Thank goodness that
I do.
It's changing, but there's still a lot of truth to that because, of course, and I went through the same thing. If you have problems on the farm, what do? You work harder. You try and work your way out of it. Well, I'll tell you, it didn't work. So when I did these workshops, part of that was that I had been asked to share my story, which I did, or I started. When I agreed to do that, I never realized
what you were getting into.
Exactly. So I started sharing my story, and I guess the most amazing experience out of that, Tracy, is the fact that there were people I had known for years. Same thing happened this morning at AgX. People I've known for years came to me with tears in their eyes because they now had someone that could relate, right? And so that's how I've learned so much through the years, is talking to other people. Sure, we have doctors, we have meds, but we can learn so much from each other. And so that's what I've done. So having said that, again, I didn't get sick, seek help, and get healed. it's an ongoing journey. And that's something I've really had to become aware of. And there's interesting little things that trigger me to going back to on the farm when financial issues were so heavy. My wife and I can have a difficult time discussing money today because every time this subject comes up, I literally lose it because it still brings back, and back then it was hundreds of thousands of dollars we were talking about.
Yeah.
Today it may be $1,000, but the reaction is the same. So my tolerance for stress has gone way down.
Well, and that makes sense. The money doesn't matter, right? It's the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and then you get to that place, right?
Exactly. But that's where it's so important to be aware. And so many people, they run into that same problem where they go, oh, okay, I'm on meds, I'm doing better, I'm doing this, whatever it is, I'm getting better, so now I can go back to my level of functioning that I had prior to the onset of stress, anxiety, or depression.
Yeah.
But so often that's not the case. And my tolerance, and I have to be aware of the fact that there are certain things in life that just simply pull me down.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting because, and people comment about this to me, is I do the kind of work. In fact, one of the psychologists I saw, who was quite familiar with my work, he helped me co-facilitate the workshops on men and depression.
Okay.
When I went for my first visit with him, he says, you know what, Gerry? I'm not surprised. You deal with people that are constantly in crisis and all the work you do. And whether you realize it or not, they're sucking the emotions out of your gas tank. And you're running on empty.
Yeah.
And so, again, that helped me be aware. And so there are times when I've had to just simply, when I'm getting fouls or I'm doing certain kinds of work, I just simply, one day I have to say, oh, sorry, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I have to take a break. But so that's kind of where the path has led me over the years. I've had, again, numerous medical appointments. I've seen a psychiatrist, a couple of psychologists, community mental health worker, counselors, therapists. Like, I've tried the gambit to try and find my way out of this. Earlier this year, my family noticed that I was going off the rails again, and so they suggested quite strongly I needed to go seek help again.
Good.
Well, where do you go, right?
Yeah.
And so someone suggested go see a naturopath.
Okay.
So I agreed to it, not holding out much hope, because I guess in my own mind I had pretty much given up hope. That, not hope on life, but hope on ever being able to fix myself.
Right.
And I suspect my expectations were probably too high. But so regardless, I went to see a naturopath. And for an hour and a half, in fact, I made the comment to her somewhere halfway through the appointment. I said, well, this doesn't feel like a medical appointment. It's like you're counseling me.
Really?
And for the first time ever, she connected dots for me.
Oh, wow.
And things made sense.
Wow.
And so I gained a much better understanding of what's wrong, what I can do to cope and to live a better life. So I left there feeling really good about that.
That's excellent.
Now, having said that, again, it didn't fix me that day.
No.
But again, so there's that awareness that I talked about. I think what really happened this spring when I saw the naturopath is I accepted the cards I've been dealt. And that sounds negative, and I don't want it to sound negative. But it's good and well to be aware, but if I'm not accepting who I am and what is wrong with me and what is right with me, how can I deal with things if I'm not accepting?
Right.
So
Resistance, right?
Exactly.
If you resist it, it persists.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
And so I now accept that I may never be 100% mentally, but I may be at 50% today. But if I accept that, then I've got something to build off of. and that's what I'm doing.
It probably took a lot of stress off. Did that?
Yes.
Yeah.
It provided a keen sense, or a really good sense of relief.
Oh, wow.
That, this is what's wrong. This is what you can do to deal with it.
Okay.
And see, and the interesting thing is, going way back to 2004, the can't say that word.
Tongue twister.
Psychiatrist.
There you go, yeah.
Said my serotonin was out of balance.
Okay.
That's the go-to, is you have a chemical imbalance, your serotonin is up.
Oh, right.
Well, here we are 15 years later, the naturopath said you don't have a serotonin problem, you have a dopamine problem.
Okay.
So, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
What do we do with that? Well, one of the issues I had was, for quite some time now, every morning when I'd get up, for 2 hours, I'd just be an angry person.
Okay.
And it didn't matter whether I thought of family, my grandkids, my kids, my siblings. It didn't matter who I thought of. I'd just be enraged.
Okay.
And most of that was just made up in my mind, right? And I told the naturopath this, and she says, you know what? That's your dopamine, and you need to have protein in the morning.
Okay. Wow.
It's that simple.
Wow.
So from that day on, every morning, within an hour of getting up, I make myself a protein shake.
Okay.
Nothing exotic, no umbrellas, nothing, no
pineapple
lettuce
and
or anything.
cherries.
No, just a shot of protein. That problem is basically gone.
Wow.
So it's these simple things, but sometimes it takes so long to find them, it becomes discouraging.
Well, and there's so much information out there, and everybody has their own theory and their own learning and their own go-to.
Yeah.
It would be overwhelming just trying to find answers,
It's
right?
overwhelming and very discouraging, actually.
Yeah.
Because if something is wrong, you want to find a fix for it, right?
Yeah.
But something else that really made me accept this a little more is, for a few years now, I've been helping people that have been injured in car accidents.
Okay.
So I see these people that one day were physically healthy, happy people, and suddenly, just like that, their lives have been changed because of a traumatic car accident, right?
Yeah.
And so they're never back at their 100%. Okay. So they adapt, they accept, and they adapt, and they live their life. And I'm going, well, that's what I have to do with my mental health.
That's a great analogy.
Well, and again, it really helps me in thinking clearer about what I need to do.
Wow. That's some great wisdom right there. That's a great journey. And the funny thing, the ironic thing is your story's not uncommon. And you've done so much work. There's been so many individuals, organizations that are making it okay to talk about. And you know what? We have Canadian farmers that listen. Canadian farmers from around the world. There's no boundaries with the internet, but we have farmers from around the world that are going to be watching this. They're going to feel that shoulder drop, really? It's not just me? And that's why I wanted you on to share your very personal journey, because I think it's so important. Sometimes we think we're so unique and special, and I say that with all due respect. I'm the only one that has this problem, but we're all humans.
Thanks.
We're all the same. There's only so many conditions and emotions and things we can experience. And I know different times in my life where I've been going through this, and you talk to somebody and they go, "You too?"
Yeah, exactly.
And it feels like the weight of the world is off your shoulders. So that is why I really wanted you to share your story.
And Tracy, it doesn't matter whether we have mental health issues, physical health issues, financial issues, relational issues. For some strange reasons, as humans, we always think we're alone in this, and nobody else would get it.
Yeah.
But others do get it.
Yeah.
So, and I really like that awareness campaign that's out there now. The FCCs of the world, Do More Ag. Yeah. I was in Alberta last week doing a workshop, and they have a program there that actually started out being called Men at Risk, again, because men are so loath to talk about it.
Yeah.
They've carried on with that program. They changed the title to Tough Enough to Talk About.
Oh.
And I just thought that was really cool.
How clever. Just to
Exactly.
change. I love that.
Exactly. It
That's
was
smart.
really, really neat. And I like that awareness that's out there.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, of course, I started talking about this in 2010. Why was nobody listening, right?
Well, and you know, you stole the words out of my mouth. There are so many people like you and organizations that have been doing so much good work leading up to this time. But I think like anything in life, there's a time and a place where all of a sudden it just explodes.
Yes.
So people like you have done, and you're doing amazing work, and others, you've planted the seeds and everything builds, and now we're to a point, evolution in the world, where we're okay to talk about it.
Yeah. And you're right. And this isn't about patting myself on the back for seeds.
I wanted to pat you on the back for that.
I appreciate
yes.
that. But at the same time, what's happening is, and I get angry. I find myself getting really angry when someone dies by suicide.
Yes.
This last fall in our community, there was a young fella, and I hear that, and it just makes me angry, because I'm thinking, what could we have done?
Me too.
But I don't know. You know what? Sometimes there is nothing we can do. But as long as we're trying, right?
Yeah.
And that's whether we know someone who's suffering or whether we're suffering ourselves. Yeah. Just as long as we're making that effort. And with this awareness campaign that we see, that will happen.
Really, when people share their story, you form a connection, and that you're not alone makes such a big difference. Human connection. I think we undervalue it in this world of technology and texting and phoning and internet. And we could do a whole episode on that, but connection is so important. So thank you for sharing that. And I know you want to touch on that a little bit. You have some thoughts on connection.
It's interesting you talk about connection and not being alone. We talk about chemical imbalances in the brain, we talk about serotonin and dopamine and all these other medical terms, but it's interesting we also have something in our brain called oxytocin, which is called the cuddle hormone or the love hormone or the God hormone. There's numerous titles it has, but it's actually interesting because it's kind of a built-in stress fighter. It helps us when we connect with people, that the stresses of our own lives kind of dissipate and disappear to a degree because of that connection. And it's I sometimes refer to random acts of kindness as being something that goes down that road, right? And a few years ago on a Saturday night, my wife and I were in Brandon actually, and long story short is my sister was planning Christmas that year, and she said instead of pulling names or exchanging names to buy gifts, she said everybody do a random act of kindness.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, a report about it at the family get-together. So that day we were in Brandon, and on our way home, we lived in Western Manitoba at the time, we stopped at Sobeys to pick up some groceries. And in the checkout line in front of us, there's a lady with some groceries. And I looked at my wife and I said, hey, we should pay for her groceries, and that can be our act of kindness, right? And she said, well, go ahead. And she said, no, I'm not going to. You do it. She says, no, it's your family. You do it. So I got, no, she's going to think I'm some kind of weirdo. I'm not going to do it. And then finally I said, no, hang on a minute. I will. So it turned out to be $25 or something. But the impact on myself when we went home that day was because I had been feeling down all day. My spirits were lifted just because of that. In fact, I made the comment on my way home. I said to my wife, if I could win $1 million and just give it to people, I'd be such a happy person, right? I'm not saying I would, but I might. And then what happened actually is this lady had been looking for me after in the parking lot because that's when it finally hit her. But then she couldn't find me, and she wrote a letter to the editor in the Brandon Sun about what an impact this had had on her. And I went, voila, there it is.
Yeah.
I felt better. She was going to have a better Christmas because of this, and it was simply due to a little bit of an act of kindness. So it's really neat to see that connection. And I've felt it in other places too, where when you start connecting to people. In fact, this morning after my presentation, the people that came up to me, some of them with tears in their eyes because they were going through a struggle of their own and felt comfortable talking to me.
Yeah, going back to that, you're not alone, there's a connection, right?
Yeah.
That's great. I was tearing up when you were telling me that because I could just imagine the impact that you had on that woman. You know, the Tim's thing where somebody pays for the coffee? You know, it happens every once in a while where I go through and somebody pays ahead of me, and the feeling I'm left with, and not to say $2 or $3 isn't important, it is important, but the feeling I'm left with from just that gesture, it could have been a 25-cent candy. It's just somebody thought enough to do that. It's just so neat.
Yeah, for sure.
Good. I love that part. Thank you for sharing that. You've gone through and you've had and are going through a journey, as we all are in life, right? You've learned a lot dealing with anxiety, depression. You've tried different avenues. Of course, I want to preface this, we're not doctors. We cannot provide advice. Everybody should see their own doctor. Important to say that. But from your experience, have you learned any tricks, tips that really helped you out?
That's an interesting question, and the short answer is yes. I mean, we see stress management presentations, and I've done them myself, where we talk about doing different things like taking an inventory and controlling what you can and but there's also simpler things that I've learned through time, and the one that really comes to mind is when I went to see a therapist a few years ago, after I'd seen all these other medical providers. The therapist sat me down and she says, okay, what we'll do is we're going to go through cognitive behavioral therapy. And I said, well, I know all about that. She says, okay. And then she listed different things that she would do. And each time I'd say, well, I know about that. And then she said, well, what can I do? And I said, there's one thing that I really struggle with, and that is my thoughts, my out-of-control thoughts. I wake up at night and I'm full of anxiety and my thoughts just start running rampant. And I says, what do I do? She says, it's very simple. She's told me that it's virtually impossible when you're deep in thought. I shouldn't say your tongue is always up against the top of your mouth. You'll notice if you're zoned out and thinking, your tongue is plastered against the top of your mouth.
Really?
Yes.
I'm trying to do it right now.
And it's really, really weird. And she says what you need to do when these thoughts are running out of control is drop your tongue. And she did a little experiment with me right there in the room. And it's bizarre how when you drop your tongue, it brings you back to the present, it centers you, and you don't have these runaway thoughts. And if you concentrate on keeping your tongue down, it's virtually impossible to get down this road of stinking thinking again.
Wow.
So,
really?
And so, you know what, at first neat. I'm going, well, okay, why have I not heard about this before?
Yeah.
But then with some people, friends, family, that would talk to me, I would say, hey, try this trick. And invariably they came back to me and said, yes, that is amazing, it works.
Wow.
And it's so simple.
Okay.
Because we get told to breathe, right?
Yes.
And so I sit down and I start breathing. Half a minute in, my thoughts are all over the place.
It might even make you a little more,
exactly,
wouldn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's simple things and there's more complex things. I'm not saying that one doesn't work and one does. Right. It's different for different people, but that's a really simple one.
Okay, let me make sure I got this. So if you are overthinking, anxiety, all of that stuff, your tongue is going to be up against the roof of your mouth.
Yes.
So then just relax and make sure your tongue, drop your tongue.
Yeah. It's that simple.
Try that, guys. Hey, you know what? There's
and
a lot of...
if it doesn't work...
Hey, it's just a tip, and we cannot be held responsible. There's a lot of farmers, as you know, and many have gone through, many do go through, unfortunately, many will go through this journey. Farming's not easy, right?
Exactly.
So every single tip that we can give and experiences and connection, I hope makes a difference for our audience. So thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
I want to change gears a little bit. You do conflict management, you've done some mediation, you work with farmers. in different capacities. I want to make a statement before I ask my question. Hearing your journey, your experience, I can imagine that you are effective and great with people going through tough experiences just because of where you've been, sharing your stories. What type of work do you do with farmers?
Well, actually, Tracy, it started out being farm debt work, helping farmers who are struggling financially. But you're right, I've noticed through the years that when farmers get a sense of where I've been, they feel this connection. And I'll never forget the guy that was sitting across the table from me, and he was quite vocal. He was using language that I only use when I golf. But he was telling me his story, and I was sitting there going, yeah, I get it. And he finally looked at me and he says, no, you have no clue. So I said, well, hang on a minute. I said, I know this isn't about me, and I don't want to talk about myself, but this is what I went through on the farm, and this is what I went through mentally. And his eyes just opened, and he says, you do get it, don't you? And so that's that connection they were looking for. And so there's, in fact, someone told me that this morning. Someone I worked with in farm mediation came to me and said she now understood why I had the ability to connect with producers. She said there's kind of one way of putting it to producers, which is cold, calculated, and
textbook,
tough news.
Probably, yes.
And farmers need to get that message sometimes, or other people, it doesn't just have to be farmers. But there's also a way of putting it where you can do it through experience and where you can get people to start opening up and becoming vulnerable and talking about it. And then these decisions that have to be made, whether it's leaving farming, whether it's carrying on farming, downsizing, whatever it may be, those decisions become easier.
Okay, that's excellent. I'm going to go somewhere with this, and I hope you're okay with answering this. There are a lot of people, it's 2018 as we're recording this, there's a lot of people that had a really bad year. And unfortunately, a lot of farmers that have had a few really bad years. And I'm sure there's some, I hope there's some conversations going on around the farm table, because communication's important. But you work with farmers, you've actually been involved in a lot of this stuff. And if somebody's watching, I really want to address this because I think it's important. We're talking about this tough stuff. If there's somebody out there, I could just imagine you're sitting at home, debt, the income's not coming. Geez, I get goosebumps just thinking of it. You're feeling alone. You don't even think of reaching out to an expert. Some people don't even know about that. If you, let's say you were in that position where you're on the farm, you're having a hard time, it's financial, it's mental, it's all of that, of course. What would you do? Where would you recommend they start? Like, they should reach out to who?
That's a good question, Tracy. And it's difficult sometimes to give people an exact answer to that. But what I do quite often and have over the years is refer them to the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line, and I know they're called something else now. They've changed their name a few times since I was involved with them. And they have resources. Number one, the counselor you talk to is familiar with farming. And so they can talk to you about mental health stuff and how to cope and learn tricks on how to cope. But further to that, they also have resources. So if someone's phoning in and it is a mental health issue, but they're facing financial struggles, they have resources to tell that person where to go to. Because the toughest thing for farmers is, well, number one, I talked about it this morning, is hiding stuff from my wife and my kids because I don't want to burden them. I don't want to talk to my neighbor because he may judge me. And there's a stigma to this, right? Or at least people think there is. Thank goodness that stigma is leaving. So there's this totally confidential place you can call, and that can open doors for you. But the key is that people need to reach out.
That's what I wanted from you.
Absolutely, they need to reach out. And it can be as simple as talking to a family member, a neighbor, your clergy, or phone a counselor, but get that help.
And that's the part I wanted you to drive home to them, is just don't be scared to reach out, really, because sitting there worrying is not going to help anybody. It's just going to make it worse, right?
Exactly.
And I know, to touch on that as we're talking about it right now, so I think it's timely, the helpline, and also I know Do More Ag and FCC, they've really stepped up, and they're working to provide resources and train people. So if anybody's at home and you're going, that's great, Tracy and Gerry, who do I talk to? Start with those resources as well, and then you know what, I think you'll be able to quickly find somebody close. You'll have a number that you can contact. So,
and you know what, we're in this day of modern technology. Google.
Yes.
And it's interesting what comes up.
Yes,
and
you're
right. Even if you don't want to talk to someone, and one of the websites I often went to, and I tell other people to go to, is the Canadian Mental Health Association, who have some short 10 questions, not survey, but an assessment you do to establish where you're at, right?
Oh, wow.
And so you can go, oh, you know what, I'm not that bad, or I'm not that good, but then it can also refer you to other, so there's all kinds of little tests you can do this on your own, but at some point in time, reach out.
Gerry, thank you so much for sharing that. You've been doing this work for many, many years. You're currently doing this work. We're bringing your message to farmers from around the world, and it's having such an impact. When you can share your story, it lets other people know they're not alone. It provides that connection. I think it provides hope. So thank you so much for sharing.
You know, I've 8 years ago when I started sharing my story, it was probably one of the more difficult things I've ever done. But from the first day I did, and the response from people who came to talk to me, I mean, I still maintain, as much as there's a medical community out there that helps us, a lot of the help people like myself get in the situation I'm in is from talking to others. Again, to make that connection. So, saying it's my pleasure to tell my story, I think that might be overstating it, but if there's something helpful in it, I'm willing to do that.
Well, and there absolutely is. If anyone in our audience would like to connect with you, learn more about you, how can they find you?
The best thing for them to do would be to look up www.gerryfriesen.ca. I've, in 2010, actually started writing a blog where I just put thoughts down on paper. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. But I've had a lot of people that have talked to me about what I write because in some small way it might be helpful to them. My contact information is in there. If people want to contact me, that'd be great. I'll gladly talk to anybody anytime. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. You know, that was all just so amazing, and I'd love to chat with you for hours on hours. I would like to take this final opportunity and thank you for everybody you've affected for coming on the show. Thank you on behalf of our audience for joining us on Impact Farming. Thanks for having me, Tracy.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.